Good afternoon, class. My name is RichardGerrity, and I wanted to dive into a topic that is related to my wicked problem, which is how to close the wealth gap between the haves and have-nots in this country. Basically, over the past 100 years, you can see the wealth gap spread significantly over time, with the 1% generating 80% of the wealth in this country, and now it's even further polarized. So in respect to accounting, I wanted to cover something that affected the majority of the population, being retirement accounts, investment accounts, etc. Specifically, mutual funds and mutual funds managed by larger banks. I won't say any of them by name, but typically they are the 1% of banks. So let's dive right in. Typically the standard of a fiduciary, meaning somebody that has the interest of the customer, they manage at a 1% fee. So in other words, if you have a $1 million account, using nice round numbers just to keep it simple, if a customer has $1 million, they hand it to a big bank, the management fee is 1%, which means every year that bank is charging $10,000 to that customer to manage their funds. Pretty standard, pretty normal. That's fine. What I've discovered is that these larger banks then create their own investment vehicles with mutual funds. Mutual funds are a pretty typical investment vehicle for all customers. Vanguard, BlackRock, and they charge a relative fee. It's not exorbitant. It's a management fee, which is separate than the asset under management fee that the big banks will charge. What has been occurring is these large banks create their own mutual fund. Okay, so that means in their mutual fund, they're picking their own stocks, right? And they're packing it into their own proprietary investment mutual fund, and they're charging the fee on that. And then what they'll do is they'll take that mutual fund and they'll put that into the client's portfolio. So if you were to get just run-of-the-mill, a financial advisor with no name recognition, they charge the 1%, equivalent to $10,000 every year on that million. If you were just to make that $10,000 back, you'd be paying that. So over the course of 10 years, right, it's $100,000 that you've paid for that management. Okay. With the mutual fund management fee, that tacks on an extra minimum of 0.1%. So instead of paying $10,000, well, now you're paying over $11,000 for the exact same performance. Okay, so when you compare the two, okay, it's the difference of $10,000, everything being equal, it's the equivalent of $10,000 more that you're paying over the course of 10 years. All right, and so you can kind of start to see that this is added up, and the ethics behind it are questionable at best. Now, just to kind of put this in some sort of perspective, with the returns of the markets, if you were to invest in a regular Vanguard ETF that's separate than a mutual fund at way lower management fees, and if you invested $10,000 in 2001 in an S&P 500, very standard boilerplate ETF, within 20 years, your $10,000 would be worth $50,000. Okay, so that's roughly 500%. It's a little bit less with reinvested dividends in the portfolio, which takes away. So it's probably closer to a 490%. In that ETF, you were charged 0.1%, which means over 20 years, that comes to, let's see, I should have done the math out prior to this. Sorry about this. So roughly you're under $10,000 for 20 years for that 10 grand. It doesn't sound like a lot, but again, over the longer course, if investors that are putting their money into these accounts and they're unaware that they're getting charged on management fees and then the sole proprietary mutual fund fees, it eats away at their gains. And it's unknown to the customer because they just think they're paying management fees, but then it tacks on and it accumulates over time, eating away at the gains. And so why does this matter, right? The so what? Well, this affects a lot of charitable giving because instead of the money going, a lot of foundations are set up, again, through these big banks, and they're doing their best to reinvest the money into the community. But with big banks assessing larger management fees and then sticking these investment vehicles where they can layer on the fees even more, the bank is acting as a broker in poor will, taking away more from these funds that are supposed to be giving back to the communities, that are supposed to be philanthropic, and they're kicking it back to themselves at a higher rate through a separate investment vehicle. So something to be aware of, something to check out on your own, in your own retirement accounts and in your own investments, and something to question your advisor if you have one. All right. Thank you for listening. I hope everyone has a great winter break. Bye.